Facebook. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to Two on One, the top-rated Disciples of Christ-based theological pop culture conversation show hosted by a person in New York and a person in Kansas. I'm the person in Kansas. I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
And I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, and I'm the one that's in New York.
Yes. And we're joined today by the Reverend Erin Wathen. Erin Wathen is a prolific author, editor, speaker, and of course, minister as well. Erin, we're so glad you're with us today. By the way, Irreverend is her tag across social media. You can find that. You should follow her, read her blog, but would you like to add to your self-introduction?
Not off the top of my head. It's just good to be here today. Good to be live anywhere other than, just my house and deck and neighborhood. So I feel like I'm in a little bit New York and a little bit Kansas and a little bit wherever Schitts Creek is on the map. So maybe
Canada.
Maybe we'll get there. Canada, all of Canada. So
all of Canada.
I feel like I'm here and there and everywhere today. So thanks for having me on.
So that actually leads me into a question about Schitts Creek. And for people who are watching, we're going to say what sounds like shit a lot, but it's SCHITT. It works better. Schitts Creek is the story of a family of a very rich, privileged family that suddenly loses everything except a small town that they bought called Schitts Creek because they bought it as a joke. They are kind of forced to move into a motel, and they discover they're human beings. Is that a fair descriptor?
I think it's pretty great.
Okay.
It's great. I apologize that there was a sound in the background of Erin talking because I was trying to share this. I'm trying to share what's happening because it's important that we like and share and subscribe to all the things that we're doing. So I apologize for that. So there we go.
All good.
Okay. I'm back. I shared it.
I don't know if y'all noticed. See, I have a sense of occasion, and I believe in dressing for all occasions. And I did not have a Moira vest or wig, nor did I have an Alexis hat, although it's on my to-do list in life to get some Alexis hats. But I did have some Stevie plaid. So
yeah, you got definite Stevie Bud going
for the day. And really, as much as I love Moira, I probably identify more with Stevie. So I've got my look.
Okay, so who's your favorite character? That's a good starting point. I think
it's so hard. It's so hard to pick one. I think I love them all at different times in their, evolution. And evolution's what I love most about the show. But I don't know. I've really got a heart for Stevie in so many ways. Like I feel her shade and her, just kind of feeling so disconnected isn't quite the word, but feeling a little bit removed, I guess, from a lot of the people and things happening around her. Also, really, really
share and subscribe to all.
Is that on me?
Sorry.
Okay.
No, it's me.
I adore David. I just adore him, and more as the show goes on. But I think deep down, if I had to pick a favorite, I'm gonna have to go Moira, just because she's so wacky and weird, and continues to. But she can always surprise you. Like just when you think how wacky and weird she is, she can always surprise you, and I just really appreciate that about her. And also, I'm getting at that age, like, let's talk about age. It feels like a bad word. We need to, whatever. But I'm getting that age where I identify more with the moms than the kids in shows like this. So, timeline-wise, I might be, what is David, basically 29? I'm basically 29 for life. But I have to acknowledge deep down, I'm a little closer to Moira's, probably premenopausal angst, and I feel that deeply as she figures out how to be her crazy wig self in this new place. So yeah.
Well, so
I love that. Wait, who's your favorite?
Me?
Arthur?
Oh, my favorite is David. Just 100%. My husband and I still will like the bedwetting episode on Schitts Creek, where Patrick says to him, I love you. And he goes, so long as one of us does. Or I forget what led into so long as one of us does. Brian and I will still say to each other, he'll just be like, I think you're a wonderful man. I mean, so long as one of us does, and we just think that's hilarious a year later. He's so unwilling to be anyone but himself, much to his detriment.
Mm.
And that's a confidence that I really admire. I mean, he's very much Moira's son. And Moira's a gay icon. I don't know. It's kind of like saying, which Golden Girl's your favorite? Like, you don't get to do that. A2 Spiff.
So it switches for me all the time. I think I land most, I identify with David most. So, which tends to make me want to be like, that's my favorite. But Moira, I think, just as far as overall character, like who she is. But then again, see, this is where it gets hard because I really appreciate Alexis. I'm on an Alexis kick right now. There is something really beautiful about what is happening in my life today where so many things are, I said Alexis and Alexa picked up. But just her growth. Wait, Erin, did you finish the final season?
I didn't. We'll talk about that in a moment, but go ahead. It's fine.
Okay.
I came on here prepared for spoilers, so it's okay.
Oh,
okay,
so okay, folks, spoilers.
So for me, just the arc of Alexis is something that I relate to. I see happening for a lot of my friends as we hit a certain age. I think there is something that happens to you in your mid-30s that, and I realize she's not there yet, but you see that arc kind of happening for her and making some. I think Alexis has the most growth as far as the Four Roses go in that world. And so for me, I want to just like, I feel like I need to just like give credit to that personal like work that she has done. And so like right now, Alexis is my favorite. This is a long way of me saying,
yeah,
Alexis.
You know what I love about Alexis too is that for all, you know, her surface level caricature, I guess, is she's so whiny, she's so spoiled, so shallow. But really, there is something so indomitable about her that I think more than any other member of the family, she just has this kind of fearlessness about her that's like, okay, so this is where we're doing life now. And just the spirit that she possesses kind of just saturates everything around her, I guess. So she has that... I don't know, there's just something about her that as much as she changes and evolves is still just the essence of her that none of their circumstances can dampen.
Well, I think for me, keep going.
No, I just want to throw in there. She also has the best lines in the series. Like flat out, they give her throwaway lines, which this is the longest relationship I've ever had. Well, actually, it's the 3 months I was with that Saudi Arabian oil magnate, but the last 2 months were just me trying to escape to find an embassy. And they never touch it, except for Eugene Levy, who's like, "What?" And
What?
I just
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we start to pay attention, I think that's also why I like Alexis, because she changes for me every time. She is like that still speaking voice that no matter how many times I've seen this entire series, I learn something else about the backstory of Alexis.
Is Alexis the Holy Spirit?
Well,
You're just going to drop that right in there.
Well, okay, wait, because
welcome to this theological
I want to add a level to this because I think we could explore it. So Alexis, the actress who plays her, I cannot remember her name to save my life.
Annie Murphy.
Annie Murphy.
Marvelous. And Annie Murphy is the outsider in the Roses because Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara have worked together forever. And, I can't wait till we get to Catherine O'Hara. But Dan Levy, therefore, has the benefit of growing up with Catherine O'Hara as well. So there's, Annie Murphy... Alexis, I think, feels like an outsider in the family. They all feel like outsiders. But the way Annie fits in and the way Annie moves out and the way Alexis moves in and the way Alexis moves out, there's some pneumatology in there, I think. But...
Did you just answer your final question in the middle of our...
Oh, no. I've got one that's going to blow your minds.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Erin, what do you think? Alexis is the Holy Spirit.
I mean, it's a little out there for me. That doesn't mean there's nothing to it. It's just not, I don't know. I guess I would have to reframe the whole show in a sense of like, if she's the Holy Spirit, what are the elements of all these other characters that interact with that? So I might have to sit with that one a minute, but
Of course.
She does sort of move through with that joyful exuberance that animates others around her. So maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that she opens the story in so many unique ways, for kind of endpoints for new people to the Roses, like at every kind of turn. I mean, one of my absolute favorite is her auditioning for Cabaret with a little bit Alexis, which is something that I sing in my home to myself all the time.
So can I just point out how well written this show is? Because I watch The Housewives, I watch New York, I watch Orange County, I watch New Jersey. My husband got me on them, and I'm sorry because I love them. And they'll have these housewives record songs that are just like it. Like, I think they hired the same composers and producers to do a little bit of Alexis.
Annie Murphy wrote that herself.
Yeah, Annie Murphy wrote it herself.
I saw a whole thing about it where they were talking about, it was, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on Patrick, the actor. What's his name?
I'm gonna.
Keep going. I'll look it up.
Noah Reed.
He did a little bit. It was just like a little video commentary about the music on the show, because I think because he's such a gifted musician, he had a hand in a lot of the music on the show, and he talked about how they were kind of, trying to think through what each of these characters would do in that audition setting. And Annie Murphy was like, can I run this thing by you? I've been working on it. And she just she's not somebody with a lot of musical background, apparently. She just sort of, it's like she just so well channeled Alexis in that moment. It was just perfection. But
I'm a Cute Huge Yacht is one of my favorite things ever written ever. Like, just period.
In all music, like it's Mozart.
No, not even music, just ever written ever. I'm a Cute Huge Yacht. It is so layered on things that I love about that character. Okay, I want to talk about kind of the world of the show, because I think that there's something, especially for those of us that work in church or work in faith communities, have a lot to learn from. And that is, so we talk a lot about building the kingdom, right? Like within what we do, how we interpret scripture and all of that thing. What is
World as it can be, reign of God. Sorry, I'm just showing off my notes.
Here are my notes for today. So my kingdom question is, so this show, I believe, really embodies a vision for the kingdom, and it was written that way in the way in which we see kind of homophobia is not a thing, right? Like at all, and it's intentional. It was written that way. It was written as a form of kind of holy stewardship around how we can be faithful to our visions. Dan is a gay man who wrote the show and is like, my character will also be someone within the queer community, and that will just automatically be accepted, right? And when we talk a lot about the kingdom in church, I fear that many of us forget to say what that actually looks like. Mm. What are the actual pieces of the kingdom we hope are present when we're in the building process? And I wonder how, what we can take from this kind of worldview that Dan Levy and Eugene Levy have created for us in Schitts Creek, and apply that to church, right? Like, so that's my question is, like, how do we take that kingdom vision and apply it to the work that we are called to do as kingdom builders?
What's really powerful about it for me is that you say how there's just like no homophobia in the show. I think they're starting with that vision of the world as it should be, rather than kind of painfully dragging the town and the characters through it. I mean, they could have easily made this like small town homophobic nightmare that this family ends up in, and maybe by virtue of getting to know David, some of them change, but they didn't go that route. They went with like, this is not even going to be a thing that these characters have to navigate and deal with in this kind of small, unlikely town that in a lot of ways is filled with people you would expect to kind of have a visceral reaction, right? And so I think there's that modeling of building the world, creating the world as you want it to be, and expecting that you're helping to create that in the process of modeling it, right? And that the viewership of your show will, if you give people the benefit of the doubt that we trust you're already in this place, they'll come along. And if they don't, they're not going to watch this damn show. I mean, anybody that is just really uncomfortable with that, they're not going to watch this show. But to kind of set up that expectation that this is the world of this narrative, and if you want to be in it with us, here's where you got to meet us. And I love that.
So can I talk disciples a little bit real fast? Like disciples of Christ, since we're all dealing. I'm in the process right now of anti-racism pro-reconciliation facilitator training, which is marvelous. And for those of you not aware, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ affirms and believes racism is a sin. And it's a sin that needs to be confronted and understood and dismantled. And we were initially anti-racism pro-reconciliation, and people pushed back against that, and the order was reversed to pro-reconciliation, anti-racism. And I think about that a lot. Because what does it mean that people are like, I don't want to be known as anti-racist? Like, if that's the case, what does that make you? And I've discovered in the church, and I've got the, okay. I've discovered.
No, it's not like it was me. Like, I see you.
I've discovered in the disciples, I've discovered in the main line, we have this fear of needing to include everyone. By being so inclusive of anything that could happen, we lose definition and we don't live into the reign of God as it can be. Like I'm preaching Ephesians 5, the household codes, on Sunday, and I'm going to be like, this is bad scripture. Like we should just not do this.
Tune into Riverside this Sunday.
Yeah, just chunk it. Because that's part of it. Like we don't need a code about how to treat slaves because we shouldn't enslave people. So throw it out. And if we have a problem with that, why are we okay with men or wives submit to? Anyways, I'm going all over the place. The church has lost its its willingness to live in the reign and exemplify what that looks like. And I think part of it's a definition problem, and I think part of it's a fear problem. I'm also going to say, do we expect the homophobic nightmare town, so to speak? When they showed up in,
No, yeah. I was going to say that homophobia does exist in the realm of the show, but it's brought by the viewer.
And and it exists around the edges a little bit. Like for instance, there's that scene where Jocelyn goes to David and she wants him to come to her school and talk to this new kid. And she opens with, "You strike me as a kid who had a rough time in high school."
It's cool.
She's not like judging him as a gay man. She's acknowledging the depth of his experience and going, yeah, you might have had a rough time getting to the point where you are now, but she sees him now as this confident, self-actualized person who can come help a kid that she sees as struggling.
But David's smart, but not so smart as to not wear sweaters in the summer.
True.
Do not judge that.
But she's, I think she acknowledges that the rest of the world is not as kind as Schitts Creek in this moment in time. And then there's also the episode where Patrick comes out to his parents, which
crushes me.
Beautifully done. That whole show is beautifully done.
So good. And
then that the parents are just heartbroken that like you were worried this would change how we feel about you. It was perfect. The episode was absolutely perfect. But I think that's another way of acknowledging this little Schitts Creek bubble is not the experience of every LGBTQ person out there. And so there again, it's that world exists around the edges and you acknowledge it and you honor it. But it's still like within the safe space of this show and this community, Patrick's good and his parents are good and everything's just delightful.
So I love that. And so all three of us have served open and affirming churches, right? At least in one capacity or another. So what does that say about the responsibility of churches within really expansive denominations like ours who hold lots of ideologies around the identity of people and the value of people for lots of different reasons? What is that? What is the responsibility of these kind of pockets of inclusion to keep at it, like Schitts Creek does, right? Schitts Creek says, here we are, here's how we have evolved, here's the people that are here and the characters, and here's our little community.
Like it, don't watch the show, which is
and if you don't, sure.
So I have a very literal story here, example. First, when I go back to what Arthur was talking about, that our definition of inclusiveness often means that we lack definition, because we are so afraid that saying we're an anti-racist church means we don't welcome racists or something like that. I guess that's the logic. I don't know. Or that being an open and affirming church means we don't welcome people that are homophobic. I think that's the logic. Like, I think that's a lot of disciple, where a lot of disciples are, and I've served different churches, different kind of contexts and communities. I don't think it's that there's genuine fear of being the church that welcomes gay people. There is fear of, do we become the church that's known only for that? Mm-hmm. And a lack of understanding about why it matters to say that out loud. Where I think like a big, and I don't want to speak too generally for every disciples church out there, but where I think most of our churches are is that we welcome everybody. Why do we have to say it? We welcome everybody. Why do we have to make these overt kind of statements that say we're not racist, that say we welcome gay folks? Because there's just not been a lot of education and intentionality around articulating why that could be an important part of your mission and identity. And so my Schitts Creek story about that is that I don't know if you've seen the video that was on social media. I saw it like a week ago. It's maybe been around longer than that, but the cast members are sitting around reading a letter that they got from that gay moms group. Okay, my church, my previous church that I served in Kansas City, got a very similar letter from that very same moms group. Hmm. And that's what this moms group does, is they communicate with organizations and individuals and, you know, anybody that's out there making the world better and safer and more kind to LGBT people. This moms group reaches out to them and says, you are changing people's lives. You are saving people's lives. And so when my church in Kansas City got that letter from that moms group, the reaction was very much the same as in that video where the cast members are sitting around, they're reading it, and they're just all like a mess. That's what it feels like when you get that gospel that says your community is changing the way the world interacts with LGBT people. And I think that most congregations that are open and affirming will tell you they've had that experience in one way or another, that they have heard from a person, a family, a group, somebody somewhere, that just you existing and being who you are is making the world a better place for folks that really struggle and are not welcomed in a lot of places. And so that was kind of my takeaway from that whole video. It was such a beautiful thing to watch these cast members hear how their stories and their characters had real impact on people's lives. And, you know, churches have that same kind of power. We are creating the world as we see it ought to be. And until you've heard somebody say, this is why it matters, this is how it made a difference in my life, you just don't know why it matters to say it out loud.
So let me ask the question that I'm hearing out of this too, because I agree with you 100%. mainline Protestantism abdicated when it comes to testimony. When it comes to the personal story of, this is God's story that we've been telling for 5,000 years, and you are part of it. You are a continuation of it. What is your story? The work that is, I mean, there's some sacred work done with Schitts Creek and done with this moms group and everything else. How do we get back? How do we take testimony back from particular parts of the Protestant church? How do we make that more accessible, more affirming, more open? Any ideas? Like, because I don't have any.
Good question. My hope is that the current situation we're in is opening the door for people to do that on new platforms, in new formats, in new kinds of engagement, because it has broken us out of our worship molds, right? And it's broken us out of our, what feels like the limitation of a sanctuary. And so hopefully that having to exist as community and live our faith as individuals and as part of a body in such radically different ways than we're used to, I hope is starting to show folks that this is not only possible, but important to share personal stories of faith and how you've been changed in community.
Well, and to ask, right? Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was agreeing. That's all I was doing. Just repeating. Not only possible.
I totally agree. And I think part of it is our fear of asking, right? Like, how often are you, even with your friends, saying like, where do you see God at work in your life right now? Like, you know, like, it's like, how are you doing? How are things happening? Blah, blah, blah. But like, we don't take time to ask the really specific question of, where is God in your life right now? Or how is God moving you? With an expectation of not only like vulnerability of sharing in that space, but of like hearing those testimonies outside of worshipful experiences, and creating the narrative that, you know, it's why people are so angsty to get back into in-person worship, because like that's where they have been narrated to say God exists. But if we took away, if every one of us sold our buildings, and I'm not advocating for that, so let me say that, but like if we did, well, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not advocating for it. This is a conversation. But like if we all sold our churches, if we really kind of leaned into that like Acts call of like, sell everything, let's follow Jesus, then the church itself becomes part of the dialogue, becomes part of the structure of testimony that we expect in this community. And I think again, this is why I really like Alexis. Part of what she does is continue that her own story in these kind of little throwaway lines, because no one's asking her. No one's asking her to share her story. No one says, Alexis, we didn't, that year, you know, when Johnny says like, there was a year we didn't see each other for a year, you know, like we didn't see each other for a whole year. No one asked, hey, Alexis, where were you? What happened?
And that's what we do to the Holy Spirit as a church.
Ooh.
It's true.
Two dudes and a bird, the worst construct of the Trinity, but it's probably the most popular.
Two dudes and a bird.
There's your new band name.
This is the three of us. We just started a band that's called Two Dudes and a Bird.
Oh,
I don't know where the other dude is.
I forget who came up with that phrase. That is not my original work.
Let's give you credit for that.
I want to ask a question about Johnny, because I think Johnny's easily the most ignorable rose, and I think that's by design.
I was gonna say, I think he did. Yeah, he wrote himself into that for a reason.
Yeah, and there's it's everyone else shows this tremendous growth, and Johnny's like, I'm a businessman who does business. And
much business.
There's personal growth and everything else, but it's interesting to me that the straight white rich man, magnate, his growth is shrinking, if that makes sense, or it's actually living into like humility and relationship. It's in the recovery community. There's the concept of right sizing, where alcoholics are egomaniacs with inferiority complexes, and it's toning the ego down but it's not toning it so down that you disappear in a little tiny like compact ball that eventually pops away out of existence. It's neither too big nor too small. And I think Johnny gets right-sized, or Johnny allows himself to become, he becomes less, but he doesn't become least, if that makes sense.
He finally takes up the space that is his, rather than taking up the space, and rather than taking up the space that wasn't his, which is the right size, right? Like that, as a straight white rich man, like there's a lot of space that he occupied that wasn't his. Schitt's Creek really, for all of the Roses, I think, helps them figure out what is the space that is theirs to take up, and helps them kind of fill it. In a way.
That's all I got about Johnny.
I will say for Johnny too, like of all of them, he seems, it might seem like he does the least growth, but he's also the least unnerved and upended, I think, by the loss of his creature comforts. I mean, where I think, or maybe he just doesn't complain as much in those early episodes, but I don't know. I feel like David and
No, you get murdered first.
Yeah, no, just the other three of them are just so clearly untethered without their clothes and cosmetics and you know, the things, and he doesn't seem quite as I don't know, it just doesn't seem to faze him as much that he doesn't have all this stuff now.
And I think part of Johnny's, I mean, so Johnny's the straight man in this entire world, for lots of different layers of that term. But he also like I appreciate Johnny because he very much cares, right? One of my very favorite, how the show is structured anyways, with those like kind of cold opens and the like, and a little bit of a harken back to The Office, where you get these like kind of cold open moments that play into the rest of the show, but
right,
not always. My very favorite one is where Moira is in, she's shooting the Crow movie, and the kids come in, they put on her wigs, and Johnny pretends to hang up, and David looks ridiculous, and he goes, "Ooh, you must feel so ridiculous." And it's just such a good like thing. And Johnny's response is, "You kids better hang those back up. Your mom keeps a spreadsheet." And like, and he just recognizes his own performative attitude within the family, but also his authority within that space, right? Like there isn't the lack of respect and authority that in his right sizing, I think, is part of the fear when we right size that we give up.
It's authority without power, or it's authority with the right amount of power. It's
yeah.
He's authorized, not he hasn't taken it. I would argue. Okay, I got to ask my other question, if that's okay, or Spiff, if you have one.
Yeah, I have lots of questions, but go for yours.
I think Stevie Budd is good enough. I don't think she's great. I don't think she's outstanding. I don't think she, and correct me if I am wrong or if my opinion is different. I see you flaring up, Spiff. I think
Erin and I both were just like,
I think Stevie, I don't think she's mediocre. I don't think Stevie is driven the way that we're all taught we have to be driven. That we, always be hustling, always be improving yourself. Erin, I don't know what your Enneagram number is, but
you two are both 7s.
Okay.
7.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to like take that away from you, Erin, and like tell you.
So
I knew that coming into that. This is a conversation with 2 7s.
We're in the aggressive triangle, which is my favorite. I just think Stevie has learned not to settle in the course of the show, but Stevie has also learned not to be like, I want to be a billionaire, I want to be a jet setter, or I guess, does she in the later season? I don't know. Stevie to me is good enough. But
I don't think she had to learn to not want those things. I don't think she ever wanted those things, but I do think being around the Roses kind of opens up another part of her, because I think a lot of her not wanting more, not being driven, is a defense mechanism. It's like, if I don't ever want anything, I will never fail. And so she's just kind of closed off. But Stevie in the cabaret episode is just something kind of miraculous. And even Moira watching her backstage, you can see Moira see it. You can see David see it. Watch, and it's like, and she surprises herself even in that episode. And I think that just her proximity to all the Roses in different ways kind of unlocks this part of her that she didn't know was there. But I mean, she works, she works with Johnny every day, and he helps her kind of grow professionally in ways she probably wouldn't have sought out for herself. Being around David all the time, she kind of gets more of this cultured, a broader worldview, all this stuff. And then there's something about her too that just in a really, really unlikely way resonates with her. Because they've both kind of got that, screw the world thing about them, that this is who I am and you can just deal with it. And I don't care if I'm too weird for you. And I think working with Moira in that show was like kind of the final turn of the key for letting her just kind of become this whole new, deeply herself. But there's a new dimension there that surprises even her.
Totally agree. And I think that we see that when she goes into the airline, and like when she leaves, like, what's the airline called? Larry Air. Larry. Well, first of all, just the way they name things in the show brings me so much joy. But she, I think, so I, as a 3, have always hated the, like, you are enough, like that there isn't enough, that just hard pass on that narrative. But I get what you're saying in the fact that I think that part of what I really appreciate about Stevie is that, like, she expects her life to change and grow, and she kind of goes with it, right? She'll push back in kind of the harder spaces that we all do, but also leans into the nuance of what it means to be a person within community. And I think that her role, especially in the kind of middle seasons, like the 3 and 4 season where we see some growth in her, is to show us that, like, it's not just about one family's growth, but it's about the way in which when we come together as community authentically, that we all change and grow in a way that is good and holy and benefits the larger vision for what we are called to do. And I think it's her saying, like, what happens when you leave me? Well, can I get that in writing? No, we won't. Can we get that in writing? And changing it to Rosebud and all of that, like she going to Johnny saying, I want to be a flight attendant, whatever that thing is. And so that, I think that Stevie shows us that that growth is expected of all of us when you enter into relationship.
I like that. Can I tell you my least favorite line in the show, by the way? It relates to Stevie.
Always.
It's, okay, her maybe this time, like in the cabaret episode, like maybe this time is now just in my rotation, and nobody does it as well as she does. But it's afterwards where it cuts to David, and David's like, that's my friend. I don't give a shit, David. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Where did that come from? Like, we didn't need that line.
Oh, see, I disagree. Disagree.
Okay, so tell me why. Tell me why.
I disagree because he just got engaged to Patrick. Patrick is in the show as well as the MC, and in no other space is he. There is something truly holy about the relationship of Stevie and David, in a way that is non-sexual. Well, I mean, I guess it has its moments, and it has evolved.
It was too awkward, and
that was weird. But there, like, that, I guess I like that it names the importance of friendships and how we need to celebrate them. There's too much of my husband, and I'm saying this as a single person, so I can name that too, but that you have one partner that you are supposed to be connected to and to celebrate and lift up in all things. This just shows that, like, that again, when we're going into community, that, like, you can have these really beautiful, intimate partnerships that you are called to support that are beyond the construct of traditional societal understandings like marriage or children, or relationship to your children. But I don't know. Erin, what do you think?
I think it's a lovely moment because he's proud of her and he's seeing a side of her. I mean, he thought he knew her really well. and he loved her for her, and then he's seeing this whole other side of her he didn't know was there, and he's just so proud. Like, that's my friend, I know her. Like, I think
it gave me chills. Like,
yeah,
I loved it.
Anytime somebody we love does something extraordinary, for us to have that pride on their behalf, it's not a selfish thing, really. It's an acknowledgement that maybe you're a part of them. Maybe you're a part of who they've become and what they've accomplished. And yeah, you can take a little credit for that. But it goes back to what you're talking about, that power of community, that it's not just about this one family's transformation. It's how they have touched and transformed everything and everybody around them, really.
And they're transformed by transforming. They're transforming by being transformed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the essence of the whole show, is that, you know, you kind of if you are open to being transformed by the people around you, you also become a catalyst for transformation.
Well,
Amen.
I mean, can we talk about Moira and the restart of her career for a second? Speaking of which, and the tennis bracelet, which is just that was maybe my favorite moment in the show. For those of you who have not seen it, Moira was a soap opera star, because of course she was. And Moira, they were going to relaunch, because it's the time to relaunch every show ever. They were going to relaunch the soap, and they invited her to come back, even though she'd been killed off. And it turned out that her co-star, intimidated by the brilliance that is Moira, arranged for her to be killed off on the show. And when she met with the producers and this and that, she said, okay, I want to pick how he dies in the show, and I want a diamond tennis bracelet. And she had these demands, and they passed on her. But she loved herself enough to make the demands to actually say, this is what reconciliation means. This is what I need out of this process. And she loved herself enough not to compromise that which is uncompromisable. And what I love about it is when she received the tennis bracelet as the invitation back, she allowed that to still be the standard by which she held it. And I'm loving this. I do these ridiculous questions, and I'm just going to let you guys say pass on this. What does it mean to reconcile without letting go? Or that is, where does reconciliation become compromise? Because I don't think those are the same thing. No, I don't think I'm phrasing this question well.
Say that in another way.
We're called to the work of reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
And that means coming to the table, knowing who we are, what we have done, what we need, where we are going. And it requires the other parties to do the same. To me, I think we think of that as compromise. And my favorite definition of compromise is an agreement by which no one is happy. Moira reconciles with the show because she doesn't let things go back to the status quo. She, in fact, demands the status quo not be upheld. Is that a lesson for reconciliation for us? That's maybe a better question. What can we take towards, because we have a lot of radical work to do as a church.
What does Moira teach us about reconciliation?
What does Moira teach us about reconciliation? And is the rest of her characterization also informing that?
Well, maybe the short answer is there can't be reconciliation without repentance, right? Without some sacrificial gesture, at least, that says, I recognize that this needs to be reconciled because of my behavior in the past, because of something I did or did not do before. And
there's an acknowledgement. Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the conversation about cheap grace, right? Can there be forgiveness without repentance, without some kind of change in behavior or posture? And maybe what Moira teaches us is no, there can't. Like, you can't be reconciled if you aren't willing to do that turning around work.
Or you're going to have to go out of your comfort zone to make amends, right? Like, there's something uncomfortable about the process for those that have been in power. and
Yes.
that is she, and I think the roses kind of exemplify that in lots of different ways, but Moira kind of specifically, and she's the one that doesn't give up her clothes, right? Like what she took with her is very much present in who she shows up in as a character.
The outfits were just,
I love them. I love them so
Her
much.
sleep vests, like
her sleep tuxedo thing that she wears.
well, the
vest and a brooch, like
Yeah, there's jewelry to it.
the fact that the closet is infinite. It's hammer space.
Yeah.
it's
Well,
wearing
and I
a carpet bag.
exactly, and I really like. I have a question on here, but we don't need to get to it. But we'll have I have a couple questions that I want to get to, but quickly. But I think that there's something that happened in Moira's wigs in allowing her to kind of code switch. There's a little bit of in how when she gives the wig to Stevie in the cabaret episode, that there is an acknowledgement there of like, in this moment and in this space that I hold, we have come together, and there's something really beautiful about that work, like that Moira is vulnerable enough to say like, come into this world with me, and this is how we can share that together. It doesn't have anything to do with reconciliation. Sorry.
That's okay. I think that's relevant though, and it gets back to the whole thing about where a lot of our churches are in the discomfort around, what's it mean to be pro-reconciling, anti-racist. And I think for a lot of folks, it's one thing to say, I'm not a racist, in that I would love to welcome people of all races and colors and backgrounds to my church. But the act of being pro-reconciling is a whole other thing, where you have to kind of enter into an experience that's outside of your own and recognize how you have been complicit, however unknowingly, in the suffering of others, and want to make active changes in order to not be part of the problem anymore. And I think that's where a lot of our white church discomfort is knowing that that's part of it, and folks just are deeply uncomfortable with doing that kind of work.
What does it mean that the Roses own the town?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they sure never use that. They never use it it's obviously a vehicle just to get them there, but are they paying rent at the Rosebud?
No, they're using the mayor's 2 free rooms, which is an interesting kind of dynamic and power shift as well that they give to Roland. And I think part of that. Now I'm gonna go on. I want to name that we are doing a 2-part Schitt's Creek this week because the Emmys are this weekend, and so yay!
And Catherine O'Hara deserves Best Actress, and I will burn down.
Rage.
I will burn it all down if she does not win.
But I want to ask, as part of kind of this, before we hit into our final question, what do award shows kind of teach us as a vehicle for hope?
What's your favorite season? Awards.
Exactly. And so, but I want to pose to the group, like, what, as we are sitting here talking about something that has changed us and has influenced the way in which we see the world, and we're about to give awards for that, right? Like, for me in this time, it's something to hope for, which I think, especially in kind of these times of chaos, it's something to kind of look forward to, and things like that offer a nice kind of vehicle of hope in times that feel hopeless. I don't know, but I'm interested in your take on award shows and what do they offer, and how do they fit into this hope that we hope that Moira or that Catherine O'Hara wins? Like, I don't know, how does that fit into the overall dialogue of what's happening?
I think it's a gratitude. I always like the Karl Barth phrase, gratitude follows grace like thunder follows lightning. And I think it's a time to celebrate what was. And I know that seems kind of ridiculous, but Schitt's Creek is over. It ended 25 years ago before this coronavirus thing happened. But we get to say, okay, good. People are celebrating this. It allows us to say, look where we've come from. And honestly, to your point, Spiff, look where we're going. Best I can do.
Yeah, I think, a public acknowledgement
of the way certain stories shape us is the best possible outcome of awards. But of course, sometimes, you just scream into the void that, like, for instance, women directors still don't win Oscars, right? So it also shows that disconnect between, the world as it is and the world as we wish it was. But I think at their best, awards can say, this story, this performer, this product, this piece of art somehow captured the best in us, and we want to see more of this being created.
I love it. Well, I think we're headed towards the final question, friends. This has been a wonderful hour. I apologize for the early audio issues that we're experiencing, but so Erin, you get to answer first in our final question, which is, what biblical story, theme, book, character, narrative are you most reminded of in the world of Schitt's Creek?
Okay, it came to me. It's Luke 9, when Jesus sends out the disciples, and he says, take nothing for your journey. No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, not even an extra tunic. Whatever house you enter, stay there and leave from there. And then there's all the stuff about if they don't welcome you, shake the dust, da, 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 da. That whole idea of going with nothing. And in that Luke context, Jesus wants the disciples to be dependent on hospitality, because he knows that's the only way they can learn to be hospitable, is to know what it's like to go and have to live on whatever somebody will give you. And I really think that is the real essence of transformation for the Roses, is that they have to learn to live off of the town. They have to learn to rely on people. They have to borrow Roland's car. They have to stay at the hotel. They live on credit at the restaurant for a really long time. I think David would have died at least 4 times in the first season, if not for Stevie. I mean, just all sorts of things like that. They have to learn how to live off people's hospitality. And I really think that is the essence of their transformation, is that they have to learn that kind of humility that it takes to be shaped by the people around you. And that's why you asked me what my favorite episode was. And I said that the season 2 finale, where they're at the barn party, it's their anniversary. I think that episode is such a turning point, especially for Johnny and Moyer, because they're in that restaurant, and Jocelyn and Roland come in, and it's like, you couldn't go to dinner with us, but you go anyway. And they end up having, their just shitty New York friends are really awful, and they end up kind of taking up for, but they are. They're not from New York. They're from the city.
They're from the city.
Is any city, right? Like maybe Toronto. I don't know. But in any case, Johnny and Moira end up being like, you know what? They're our friends. And I think they recognize in that moment all these other people in their lives just totally bailed. But the people,
these are our friends.
This town has taken us in and made us. And I think that's just a real linchpin for their whatever. So that's my really long answer, but I love that.
These are our friends, this is our home is such a powerful thing to name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arthur, you want to go or you want me to go?
I am going to go because I have it. And
you're so excited, I can tell.
Well, this is the first time that I've gone this direction. I'm going to get Christological in this concern.
Do it.
Because I'm not only going to suggest that David, played by Dan Levy, is the synoptic gospel Jesus, but I'm going to argue in under 60 seconds that Twyla, I cannot remember her actual name. Twyla, the daughter. Nope, I got to do this right. Sarah Levy is the Johannine Jesus. So, in brief, David's best line in the entire series, in my opinion, is I like the wine, not the bottles. It is the perfect statement of inclusion. I often think a lot about you don't put new wine into old wineskins because it not only ruins the wine, it ruins the wineskin. And this is about new wine, and it's about new movement. And there's a lot of relational things, and just David is incredibly human. I loved when they bought a medium pizza and he proceeds to put half of it on his plate. I don't know why I associate that with Jesus at the Last Supper, but I do. And then Twyla, this is your spoiler, and I'm sorry, Twyla's a millionaire. She won the lottery, and everything in the series that she did is from the context of having no need for a job, no need for, she could have probably written a check and put the roses right back where they were, but instead she took a servant's position. There's a lot of this like new wine at Cana of people don't know what they're getting. They assume it's anybody but Jesus doing it. And I always have this plan that I'm going to rewatch Schitt's Creek fully aware of what Twyla is and see how that story comes. Much as we're supposed to read the Gospels as people of Easter on the other side of the crucifixion to which the Gospels are building up to. But that just kind of came to me, and I couldn't let us go without talking about Twyla too. So, okay, Spiff.
Love Twyla. Okay, so I went for the 4 roses are the 4 Gospels and the 4 lenses that we are called to understand the work of Jesus. And I named it as such. Johnny is Mark because it's kind of the old reliable. There's kind of relies on the highlights. We don't have a whole lot of backstory. You kind of enter with John the Baptist. You know, you enter with Johnny, you know that he's got Rose Video and where he's at, but like there's kind of movement forward. You have Alexis as Luke because Luke is written for someone else. There's this real PR spin to it. It's relational, but it's definitely for a specific audience, and that is what Alexis kind of does. She contextualizes everything that she is going and moving towards to a specific audience. David is Matthew. He's always trying to figure out how he fits into the family, how he fits into the full lineage of narrative from that very beginning of Matthew opening up saying like, here is the like lineage of Jesus. So David very much, I think, is trying to figure out in which path does he kind of like align? Where does he fit into that? And Moira is John because the word is and was, and her language encapsulates what is supposed to be well known and recognizable, and yet pushes you in a space that pulls you in.
Let's not enumerate our poultry before it's incubated.
Exactly. I went with a really Safonsified answer. So just because it's my favorite word that she just wonderfully brings in. So anyway, so that's how and then I also saw the entire Schitt's Creek as the book of Esther in a way in which God is never explicitly named but is seen in action all over the place. And there's a lot of really strong women. There's a lot of kind of saving people. And what does that mean of like knowing who you are and knowing who you're called to be. So for me, that was that.
I love that. That's, I think, my favorite answer you've given so far with this final question. Travis, we're still waiting for a song. Our guest today has been the Reverend Erin Wathen. Erin, thank you so very much for doing this. I am so thrilled that I finally got to put a face to the name because we've never actually met in person, and this is as close to in person as we can get right now. So thank you for doing 2-on-1 with us. We will be back next week with the Reverend Danny Goulden out of Geist Christian Church in Indianapolis. Danny is coming to talk about Schitt's Creek, and hopefully we'll be pouring champagne and sharing medium pizzas about Catherine O'Hara.
Winning, yes.
And if not, I'll be sobbing, but that's okay. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the stuff. Email us 2on1project@gmail.com. Thank you, Erin. We know you have another obligation. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Our recording and stop us on Facebook. So, goodbye.